Hi there, guys. Welcome to this week's 5Y5. Ali Maxwell and George Ellick here. We are 5 Yards ambassadors. And the premise of this show is every single week, halfway through the week, we get together. We have a little natter about a couple of players that have caught our eye, either in general or in the midweek action. And we look at them with a 5 Yards lens. Well, as you know, probably by now, 5 Yards is the place to prove yourself as a scout. Hundreds and hundreds of players from across the world of football on 5 Yards for you to go on to scout. Leave your opinions, leave your predictions down there. And if you want to put your money where your mouth is, you can buy them, put them into your squad as well, and make, or not, money, depending on how their career goes. So we're all about scouting, player development, talent, of course, from across the world of football. And that's what George and I are going to talk about today. We pick 5 players to choose from. And every now and again, we've got a special guest on, cleverer than us, to talk about a player that they know very well. We've got a bit of that coming up shortly. But first, George, we talk in between the weekly transfer windows. They are open from 9 till 6 on Tuesdays and Fridays. That's when the majority or all of 5 Yards business gets done. We had a busy one on Tuesday, didn't we? People are really still getting well involved with these transfer windows.
Yeah, really, really busy one, and great to see the amount of buys that roll in. And it's interesting how sometimes nothing kind of discernible happens, but there is like a rush to buy a certain player. And it's not like you and I have spoken about Oliver Skipp much on 5Y5 before. I mean, he's had a very good season and he's playing well for Norwich, but there's nothing that's happened, as far as I can tell, over the last 3 or 4 days that has meant that a load of people should come in for him. But we've seen a massive surge of buys of Skipp. So someone somewhere decided that now is the time to get involved. I don't know if there was any rumours about that he might be heading back to Spurs in January or something like that. People anticipating a bit of Premier League PP. But Skipp has been probably the most popular player over in the last transfer window on Tuesday. A couple of other interesting EFL ones that stand out for me as well. Harry Pickering, a player who is still being linked to a move away from Crewe, possibly to Sheffield Wednesday now rather than Blackburn, but he is proving popular too. A few buys of him. Rodrigo de Paul, obviously not EFL. He continues to be one of the most popular players on the game. So loads and loads of players being bought. We are here to hopefully shed some light on a couple of players that we think maybe you should buy or you should leave alone. You know, hopefully if you listen to us, you'll be in decent shape. Fingers crossed, that's why we're here at least.
Friday's transfer window is set to be a busy one as well, so make sure you are ready for it. We're going to try and give you a hand by talking about 5 players on 5 Yards that we think are interesting. Not all of them strong buys, but just players to think about. I'm about to be replaced by our special guest for this week, Joe Donnohue of Scouted Football.
So delighted to have on 5Y5 an expert guest this week from Scouted Football, Joe Donnohue. Joe, great to have you here. Whenever I'm thinking about speaking to anybody about up-and-coming talent in world football, Scouted is the place to go. You host the Scouted podcast that I've guested on before, and you've chosen a player who I'm almost embarrassed to admit I knew embarrassingly little about when you told me who it was going to be, and I haven't spent much time doing anything else but researching him since. So tell us who you're going to tell us about now.
Oh well, thank you, George, for having me on. Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I've been quite interested in sort of how 5 Yards has been going. So it's it was good to see that Noni Madueke was on there. Not too much performance pay at the moment, but that's because he's playing for PSV Eindhoven in the Eredivisie at the moment. But he's just a really interesting player. Only really came across him about a year ago, I think, because he played for PSV in a mid-season friendly against Club Brugge, and he was not your typical 18-year-old right winger, because he was very, very good on the ball, very good, very robust for his age, and a really, really good ball carrier. And this season he's done well in the Europa League, he's done well in the Eredivisie, and he's still not a guaranteed starter for Roger Schmidt at PSV. So to have got 8 goals and 7 assists in around 1,000 minutes is it's pretty special for a teenager who's not playing at home.
And anyone who's watching this or listening to this thinking, oh, this sounds interesting, a PSV youngster, he's English. he's one of our own. I mean, that's the key thing here. He's an English teenager. He's 18 years old. He's playing, not not starting every game, but he's playing regularly in the Eredivisie as well. I mean, what kind of player is he? Where are his strengths?
Well, he's very direct, and it's interesting that you mentioned there he's English, because he's English born. But in the last few days, I think it's been rumoured that he's going to declare for Nigeria. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet, but there's talk of that potentially happening. But in terms of his style, he can play off the right wing. He can play up front in sort of the 4-2-2-2 that Schmidt plays at PSV. He's just very, very good at carrying the ball, very good at creating chances for his teammates, which, usually when you get a player who's very direct, very quick off the mark, sometimes that composure for the final movement is maybe not as refined as it might be in an older player. But this season he's got, I think it's around 0.5 assists per 90 in the Eredivisie, which is, I mean, it's the best in the Eredivisie because he's come off the bench so frequently. But that's because he's turning this directness, this good ball carrying ability, his ability to hold his balance well, ride challenges, and turning that into producing for the likes of Cody Gakpo, Donnohue Malen, who Sam Tighe spoke about on 5 Yards 5 the other week, and Moe Hatarin, who's also a very, very good player. So yeah, there's lots to be excited about with him, because the fundamentals of his game are very much there early on, which a lot of the time you perhaps don't see. You usually have the exciting element, which is the ball carrying, which is absolutely the most striking characteristic of his on the pitch. But it seems that output is also there, which you might see in a player who's perhaps 2 or 3 years older. It's
interesting, just going back to what you said about the Nigeria link. I'm somebody who's followed Ebereze's career very closely, and what I'll tell you is that if Nigerian football fans have a claim to a player, I would avoid social media, because there are rumours circling pretty regularly that they're about to declare. So I'll wait until we've heard from the player himself. But he's up on 5 yards at 30 million. An 18-year-old English teenager up at 30 million. But you compare him, I guess, to some of the starlets in the game who are English. Your Jadon Sanchos, your Phil Fodens, Bukayo Saka. Like, these players are up on the game kind of double or more that. So could there be some value here? Like, you've said that he's somebody who creates a lot of chances and gets assists. Well, that's brilliant for performance pay itself. He's going to be playing a lot of games for decent sides, at least in the short term. Like, where do you see his career progressing from here? Is it now, he'll be at PSV for a few years and then could step up, or could he be on the radar of some of the bigger clubs in Europe fairly soon?
I think the way that PSV typically develop their youth prospects, or at least the players who come through the under-19s and young PSV team, is that when they are ready, they will play them in the first team, which I think we've seen over the past 12 months with Madueke. But I think probably best for him would be to stay at PSV for another year, because with the Eredivisie, the top two teams qualify for the Champions League. Winners of the Eredivisie qualify automatically for the group stage, and the second place team qualify for the second qualifying round. So there's quite a good chance that PSV will be playing at least some European football next season. If not Champions League, then almost definitely the Europa League, because it's kind of a ding-dong battle at the top. I think they're only 1 point behind Ajax in the table at the moment, and PSV finished top of their Europa League group this season. So there's the potential that he could have a good run in the Europa League this season as well, because they've got Olympiacos in the next round, and I mean it's not a straightforward game, but it's a simpler tie than getting a team who's perhaps more prestigious coming down from the Champions League, who finished third. I think the fact that he's predominantly played from the bench this season means that next year, or even in the second half of this campaign, we'll probably see him start more. That was very much the case with Cody Gakpo last season. He was fulfilling minutes much of the time off the bench. This season he's really developed physically, and has turned his goal output from the under-19s and young PSV side into goals for the senior team. So I'd expect Madueke to do a very similar thing, perhaps more on the assist side. He has scored 8 goals, which is obviously very good, but I think in the long term he's more of a he's more of a creator than he is a finisher, which is why I think it works so well with him playing up top with a Donyell Malen, someone who can feed off those chances. So I think he won't be at PSV forever. I think that's absolutely clear. I think predicting where he'll go, it's a lottery, because we've seen the likes of Jadon Sancho go to Borussia Dortmund. Who's to say that Madueke wouldn't go to the Bundesliga, which has been good for developing young players. But I personally, I'd love to see him in the Premier League. I think purely for the narrative of he's one that got away because he was an ex-Spurs academy grad. So it'll be interesting. But I think long term in the future he'll be playing some good level football, definitely.
Gareth Southgate, if you're watching, get on the phone to Noni Madueke and make sure that he commits for us. As I say, on 5 yards at 30 million, could be a snip if he is as good as some of those other prospects we've mentioned. Now, Joe, you do the scouting football stuff, but your day-to-day, your day job is as Leeds reporter for Leeds Live. So I'm going to talk to you about a Leeds player now for our second player in the 5x5. And how is this for a tenuous link? We spoke about a player there who went from England to the Eredivisie. Pascal Struijk, youth team player at Ajax, went over to Leeds and is now breaking into the Leeds first team. He is one of the many players who is being put up on 5 yards for the next transfer window on Friday. He's being put up at 17 million, which is 1 million less than Calvin Phillips. It's 11 million less than Ben White. Obviously, Struijk can play either as a centre-back or as a holding midfielder, and that seems a bit toppy to me. It seems a little bit high. He's a player who Marcelo Bielsa clearly has a lot of time for. He was brought into the first team fold very early on. He was on the bench for both playoff semi-finals against Derby the season before last. But having seen what I've seen, I'm struggling to see how he breaks into being a top-level player. I watched the game against Crawley where I think he was taken off at half-time. Calvin Phillips played on the right-hand side of a back three, and Struijk played that Calvin Phillips role. And in terms of being a ball player and progressing the ball quickly, as Phillips so often does, whether that's ball retention within his own half or looking up and getting his head up and playing those raking balls to break into the final third through the lines, he doesn't seem to really possess that. So I'm hoping, Joe, you can tell me what it is about Pascal Struijk that makes him an exciting prospect, or maybe you agree with me and you can't see the hype.
I think that in terms of a 5 yards perspective, I think perhaps being 1 million less than Calvin Phillips may be a bit high from my sort of perspective. He's not Calvin Phillips. He's 4 or 5 years younger than Phillips. So I think it would be wrong to expect big things from him straight away. And I think the fact that he's been used as a centre-back, as a defensive midfielder, he hasn't really found a groove yet where he can fit into the team. He's been very much a utility player because Leeds have had a lot of injuries in defensively this season, so he's had to fill in all over the place. So it's not been an ideal situation, but I think in terms of him being a worthy first-team player, then absolutely, he's of that quality. And long term, I'd say he's probably going to be a centre back rather than being a defensive midfielder. I think it's very difficult for anybody to find a similar player like Calvin Phillips because of how refined his position is. I think it was only at the end of his first season under Marcelo Bielsa that Phillips said that he was finally sort of getting to grips with the nuts and bolts of the role. So to expect a player who has played not a great deal of senior football in Pascal Struijk and to come in and deputise in that very specific, very codified role is always going to be a big ask. But I think in terms of 5 yards, I think he's a player that people will be interested in, of course, because he's in the Premier League. He'll be getting that sweet PP if he gets on the pitch. But he's definitely one for the future. Depends on where his ceiling is. In recent games, if I'm being honest, I think he's actually been quite solid. When he's came in at centre back, came on for Diego Llorente the other night against Newcastle, and looked pretty solid. Always does well in the air, which is an area that Leeds maybe haven't been as good this season. So I think you're right to have a bit of caution, especially sort of coming in at that price. But I think on the whole, he's a first team player.
And I think if Marcelo Bielsa rates a player, we should probably learn that you probably should give him the benefit of the doubt as well. Joe, brilliant to talk to you. I recommend anybody listening or watching to do check out the Scouted Football podcast, all the Scouted Football stuff you can find on social media as well, and give Joe a follow for all of his Leeds updates too. Yeah, thanks very much to Joe for joining us on 5y5. Fair to say, I didn't know a great deal about the player that he chose, but I'm now incredibly excited, and I've spent the last 3 hours googling whether he's going to play for Nigeria or England, so that just shows where my priorities now lie. Joe has done a good job in persuading me that he is someone we should be looking at very, very closely on 5 yards. Ali, a player who certainly will be involved for England in the summer at the Euros, is your pick you're going to talk about now.
Yeah, absolutely. This is someone that I am just so excited to watch play for the next 10 years, maybe 15. I mean,
Hopefully 15.
Sports science is evolving all the time, George. And not only that, someone with the football IQ of this player can generally extend their career fairly well, barring disastrous injuries. And we certainly don't wish that on anyone. But I can't wait to watch Phil Foden play for probably, let's be honest, Manchester City and for England for the foreseeable. He is one of the most expensive players on 5 yards, as you would expect. He's just 20 years old, of course, and this week he made it 100 appearances for Manchester City. There has been talk about how he's been held back, some criticism of Pep Guardiola, frustration, I guess, for people who just want to see more of this player. But I think when you take stock and you realise that this guy has just turned 20 and he's played 100 games for Manchester City, you realise he hasn't really been held back. And actually, he was flagged up to me, a tweet by Ollie O'Connell. Now, Ollie is someone who's a great friend of 5 yards. He's written a piece for the 5 yards site this week, and it's a really interesting, I think quite a thoughtful and thought-provoking for the reader piece about what it takes to move up from the Championship to the Premier League. How we as scouts, how we as people on the 5 yards site can work out, okay, not only do I think this player might get a move to the Premier League from the Championship, but I think he might thrive. I think he might stay there for the foreseeable as well. And Ollie's taken a look at some really good recent examples and put together something of a kind of boxes to tick for who works and who doesn't. So I would go and read that on the 5 yards site immediately. But back to Foden, it was him that pointed out, Ollie, to me earlier. He's appeared in 100 games. He's won 85 of those games. He's won 2 Premier League titles already, 41 goal contributions, which of course in 5 yards terms is what we're interested in. And he's just got his first few England caps as well in the last year. Never been burnt out, never been overused, blooded over time, and clearly improved tactically and technically, said Ollie. I think it's hard to disagree with that now, to be honest, and very easy to get excited about having this player in your 5 yard squad for the next God knows how long. £85 million on the site, so one of the most expensive players in the game, but rightly so. And I think this is a great time to add Foden to your squad personally. And those of you who watch 5 yards 5 every week know that I'm not here giving up strong buys every single week. I'm quite reserved in a way in my 5 yard strategy, really. But I'll certainly be adding Foden to my squad on Friday. Part of it is short term. I'm looking at the upcoming Champions League knockout fixtures with great interest. I'm trying to work out which teams might go deep and play, 3 or 4 more rounds of fixtures in the Champions League, because that's where performance pay really kicks in at the very high level. Foden has started 12 of City's last 15 games, with KDB out as well. It feels like he's growing into a more senior role, a leading role, if you will, for this City team. And they're one of the favourites to win the Champions League. They've got a plum tie as they go in the Champions League against Gladbach in the round of 16. And Gladbach's strengths are not in defending. That's certainly for sure. If you look at their XG against in the Bundesliga this season, very much middle of the pack. So I'm sure they'll give City a very good game. But the form that they're in at the moment, and the way that Bundesliga teams tend to play when they're behind, I wouldn't be surprised if, certainly in the second leg, Gladbach go hell for leather and there might be spaces opening up. So I can see a lot of PP on the horizon for Foden. He's got the 12th most performance pay on 5 yards in the last month. So he's in really good form in terms of goal and assist returns and wins, of course, with this City side. So I think he's got at least 5 million in performance pay just from now until the end of the season, especially if they go deep in the Champions League. That could end up looking like a very conservative estimate. The very top players in the world get between 10 and 15 million pounds in performance pay per season. And I think he can be in that bracket for a very long time, which is why I want to be along for the ride. I don't see his value dropping significantly for ages and ages. So I wouldn't be concerned about losing a ton of value in my asset here as well. Of course, the best of the best, PP machines like Lewandowski and Bruno Fernandes, they can get towards and over £20 million in PP per season. You wouldn't expect Foden to ever reach those levels, but it's not hard to see how he's going to be at the top of the game, playing for one of the best teams in the game for the next decade. So I couldn't be more excited, really, as an England fan, as someone who loves this sort of player, and I want Foden in my squad, which, again, I would just reiterate, this means a lot coming from me. Most of my squad are EFL players. I'm more of a buy low, sell high kind of guy when it comes to Foden. I just think of all the players in his age bracket, he's the one that I think's the most of a sure thing at the moment, along with Sancho and Haaland, and he's much cheaper than them on 5 yards. So there you go, George.
You're basically saying that he's not your type, but you fancy him anyway.
Something like that. Like that. Who have we got to finish us off? 2 EFL players, I reckon.
Yeah, well, you sent me my scouting mission, didn't you?
I
you sent me off with my binos to go and stand on the touchline somewhere. Obviously we're not allowed to, but you sent me out to go and scout Keane Lewis Potter, who is a wide player at Hull, who's 19 years of age, who, to be honest, it wasn't too hard a job because he's a player that you and I have taken a great interest in over the last year or so for our work with Not the Top 20. And for those people watching this or listening to this who aren't as au fait with 5 yards as others, there are 2 things I should say. First of all, you'd have heard Ali talking about PP. That's performance pay, and that is how, in effect, players are valued and how you make money in 5 yards. And you get performance pay for goals, for assists, and for playing in wins. So you've heard Ali there talking about Phil Foden. Understandably, not many players are going to get more PP than a goal-scoring wide player at Man City who's going to play for England for the next 10 years. Keane Lewis Potter is not going to get you any PP in the moment because of the competition he's playing in. He's obviously in League One. So this is more of a long-term hold, and he's there up on the game. He's there to buy for 15 million, which probably seems quite high for a player who isn't going to pay you anything, at least to start with. The second part that I should say is, in terms of the scouting side, if you're listening to this and you love this kind of stuff, you're really into scouting and player development, but you're not really too fussed about putting money in or playing the game in that way, you can sign up to 5 yards and write scout reports, which you can then show and share to other people, and other people will start following you as a scout. And part of the scout report is rating a player's attributes, and in doing so, it will come up with a radar showing you, as we've all seen on social media, all the different strengths and weaknesses of a player. For Keane Lewis Potter, that radar is pretty much a circle because there is pretty much nothing that the boy can't do. He's a right footer playing on the left-hand side, and he is very, very, as any winger is going to be at that age, he's very, very good at carrying the ball forward with his ball at his feet. He's got lovely feet. He's good at those bits of skill that you sometimes see in tight spaces, which you know it's just an innate talent. It's the ability, it's the 5 yards effectively to be closed down, shut down, and without even thinking, have the feet and the wherewithal in order to spin your man. He's very, very good at that. He's quick. He's a good passer. He's creative, and he also scores goals. He's somebody who it's hard to see where that weakness really lies. If I were to tell you, Ali, for example, that he scored 6 goals this season, 5 in the league, 1 in the Papa John's Trophy, 4 of those 6 goals have been headers. He's somebody who, despite being a creative wide player, is very, very good in the air. He often gets into the box at the back post or from set pieces to score. So if you're looking for somebody who long term is going to provide you, you talk about PP machines, he will be that because he's going to play in a position, and because of his skill set where he's going to create, he's always going to be a creator. That is his role in the team. But if you couple that with being an effective goal scorer, both with the ball at his feet in that normal left-hand side position, cutting into his right, but also from set pieces, being good in the air and being brave enough to get his head on the ball, there's no limit to what he could do. I'm not sitting here saying he's a buy at 15 million. I think there are too many unknowns. I'd like to see where his next move is going to be. I think if I was going to buy him now, I'd probably want Hull not to get promoted to the Championship, because I feel like he turns 20 in February. I feel like there's no way he'll play next season in League One. I think if Hull do go up, it would take a big offer for him to go. And I think for the purpose of that buy, you'd want him to be playing higher up the pyramid, possibly even Premier League football fairly soon. We've seen Jared Bowen make the step up from Hull to West Ham, and he's now, an absolute lock to play on the right-hand side for West Ham every week. If Lewis Potter is available in the summer, it wouldn't surprise me to see him go to a lower half Premier League side. And then how quickly does that value move up? I'm not sure. I'd probably like to play then. He's a player that I really like. I'm sad to see there are no scout reports up for him at the moment. So any Hull fans watching, please do go on and submit one, because I'd love to see it, because he is a player with so many strings to his bow. 15 million, not for me now, but he's one I'm watching. He'd be on my watch list to add to the squad at a later date.
Do you know what? After I set you the task of watching Keane Lewis Potter, I ended up basically doing my own scouting job on Jacob Greaves, his Hull teammate. And so this is something of a Hull City special to finish this week's 5x5. And it's not for no reason either. Hull are in very good form. They are towards the top of League One. In fact, the current bookies odds give them a 60% chance of promotion, which is a strong position to be in at this stage. But from a scout's perspective, there will be plenty of eyes on them because of the presence of Lewis Potter and Jacob Greaves, a 20-year-old left-footed centre-back, and Lord knows they are getting very fetishised in modern football. They are at the heart of this team. Inarguably, two starters, two key players for this side. Greaves moving into the side early on in the season has made that centre-back spot his own. So there'll be plenty watching these two. Greaves is the son of a former professional, Mark Greaves. I think that's got to be a good thing for having good guidance through his career, and when we want players to make the right choices, not make the wrong moves, very, very specifically in 5 yards terms, is crucial, not getting stuck somewhere. And we have got a scout report for Greaves on site. Joe Morgan, who's a really good scout on 5 yards, he calls Greaves a good technical defender, someone who likes to engage attackers as soon as possible and cut attacks out early, composed and shows good intelligence to compensate for a bit of a lack of physicality at times, but is quite athletic and likes to get forward when he can. The key thing here, Greaves at 6 million on 5 yards, the key bit is the potential to play in the top flight. Now that's what we're after here, isn't it? Any League One player, because as you say, they're not receiving performance pay for what they're doing in that division, it has to be about whether they can get into the Championship for smaller returns, and in terms of big returns, it's got to be all about whether they can get into the Premier League. And I think that what Joe says has to be exciting. Greaves certainly has that touch of class about him. He certainly needs to strengthen. That's been noticeable in performances against some of League One's better strikers, more physical strikers. John Marquis shrugged him off the ball early in the game between Portsmouth and Hull on the weekend, and actually Greaves ended up winning a free kick from it. But many replays later, it was clear that actually it was a clever bit of physicality from Marquis, and Greaves was probably lucky. It would have gone down as a mistake from him if that goal had gone in. So plenty to grow into. But I think, actual physical deficiencies at the age of 20 are probably the ones that worry me the least, I would say, at this stage, because he is tall. And I think filling out comes more naturally than the very basics, the innate defensive positioning, the defensive instincts that he clearly has. The composure on the ball is certainly there. He's got decent passing range on his left foot, and as we know, if you're left-footed as a centre-back, you're worth twice as much as a right-footed centre-back. Whether that's right or wrong, that seems to be a fact at the moment. So there'll be plenty of clubs, Premier League clubs watching him, Championship clubs, of course. If you look at Championship centre-backs on 5 yards, you've got Nathan Collins at Stoke. He's a year or two younger. He's 19 million on 5 yards. Harry Souttar and Dale Fry, similar age. They are at 9 million on 5 yards. So if there's a promotion for Greaves, and if he's playing for Hull in the Championship next year, I could easily see a price rise on the horizon. And it's certainly not hard to see a transfer on the horizon for Greaves. As we know, Premier League clubs are actually pretty happy to buy centre-backs from the EFL. They seem to quite like a young defender who's been battle-hardened, if you will, in EFL football, more so than in academy football. I was looking on who scored at the centre-backs with the most minutes in the Premier League this year, and I make it 11 out of 20, so over 50% of the centre-backs who have played the most in the Premier League this year have played significant time or started their careers in the EFL. So getting this first-team exposure at such a young age, at just 20, should be huge for Greaves' development. And 6 million, of course, that's just quite a nice price for a long-term hold, isn't it? It's a low price, it's a low risk, therefore. It's hard to imagine Greaves' career going anywhere other than up. The question is how far. So I think he's definitely worth checking out, along with Lewis Potter. If there are any budding scouts listening who want a little assignment for themselves, then there you go. Go and watch Lewis Potter and Greaves. Let us know what you think. Write your scout reports on 5 yards. And this Friday, we've got a transfer window opening. We've got 20 new players, as always, going on 5 yards, including Erling Braut Haaland's cousin, who is called, I'm not kidding, Albert Braut Tjaarland, somehow. There is next to no footage available for this kid online. I think he's 16, so the scouts have their work cut out trying to work out a price.
I'm going to send you on a scouting mission to him next week, I think.
We've also got Premier League players like John McGinn and John Stones going up. Youngster Cade Gordon of Derby, who's 16-year-old, rumours that he might be signing for Liverpool. And in EFL terms, Luke Jeffcott is a name that stands out. Joint top scorer, I believe, in League One at the moment. Still only he's just turned 21 actually this week. And someone whose goal return certainly makes him worthy of a bit of in-depth scouting. And for any Leeds fans watching, Pascal Struijk, I know he's a popular young player who's got some first-team exposure. He'll be up on 5 yards as well. So we hope you guys will get involved with the Friday transfer window. We hope you'll be involved every day writing scout reports and filling up your scout profile. From George and I, thank you so much for listening. If you've listened to this as a podcast, for watching on our YouTube channel. And we just ask that you subscribe either to the pod feed or the YouTube channel so you can get this every week fresh out the oven. Thanks for watching.